Thank you for your patience.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Queenie Clem with Queenie's Book Talk and Reviews, and I am your literary ambassador. And today, look who I have, Dr.
Woohoo!
Velma Bagby. Welcome, welcome, welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, Miss Queenie. I'm great.
All right, tell us about yourself.
Hey, I am a six-time award-winning author. This book that we'll be talking about today is book number 15. And I began my writing career after retirement and published my very first book in 2018. And so I am also a certified dating relationship coach. I'm married to a pastor. We've been in ministry for 10 years for the ministry that he planted. And I am an ordained minister as well as the CEO of my publishing company, Adonai Publishing, LLC.
All right. How long have you been a preacher's wife?
Well, my husband planted the church 10 years ago, but he was also assistant pastor for about 7 years in the church we were in prior to that. So actually 10 years as a pastor's wife, but I that didn't erase the fact that I've seen what can happen to other pastor wives along the way.
All right. What is the biblical role of a pastor's wife?
Basically, she is co-leader. It doesn't change much from our mandate in our marriage, and I think that's kind of what we all kind of talk about in the book. Each of the women in the story shares their own personal experience, but I think what has happened over time is a lot concerning leadership in the church has been more male focused, and
Mhm.
it has come a long way since then because I remember being placed on the floor when I've preached as a guest speaker at another ministry, and they wouldn't allow me in the pulpit, put me on the floor. And then, as even as recent as 2014, when my father passed away, we were looking for a larger church venue, and we had a friend that had a large church, but he told my brother he wasn't going to allow me in the pulpit because I had to bring the message. And so we predominantly decided as long as our family have the space in the church building we were in, we would host it in our own church building because of that reason. So some churches have come along a
Mhm.
way in
Mhm.
terms of allowing women in ministry and how they treat us, but it's still a work in progress in many of the denominations. And it doesn't erase the fact that many of us had to go through some of the things we went through in the process. But biblically, we are mandated in our marriage first. The role or assignment in a church, which is run by our board, that board runs the church ministry. He does not, or they do not run your marriage. And that's kind of the perspective I've taken in my approach to writing my contribution for this book.
Oh, wow. Now you're in an anthology called
Mhm.
All the Preacher's Wives.
Yes.
Briefly describe this book.
Well, I'm going to show you a picture of it because it's been described as pulling back the curtain. Because really, a pastor's wife has been kind of a role that you didn't hear much about. You didn't hear many people talk about it. And many women in the beginning of this role just kind of sat beside her husband, and that was pretty much the nature of what she did. She just sat beside her husband. But there's so many who did more than that, and even now we do more than that. Because when my husband and I entered into ministry, we entered in as a partner in the process. When we were in the old church prior to planting the church, we tried to continue that partnership even in ministry. But there's so many who entered this role as a preacher's wife at the beginning of their marriage, and I find that really challenging and complicated because building that foundation in your relationship is important even before you take on that assignment. So it's a real big challenge. I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's a big challenge. And so in that role, I find that in all the stories I've heard so far, I found there's a common thread in terms of how isolating the position can be. Because if you're having challenges and problems, who do you go to talk to? And
Mhm.
so it can be a very isolating position unless you have some really close friends, which I'm thankful I have, that I've never felt lonely in the role because I've had close friends by my side and the support in my family. So I've had that. But many of these women didn't have that. I talk about watching growing up, being in ministry and watching the first lady or they call them first lady. I don't refer to myself as a first lady, but they call the pastor's wives, where they treated the congregation treated the pastor's wife very poorly, and they ended up in divorce. So I've watched a lot of tragedy as I was
Mhm.
coming along in ministry, and I was determined not to repeat some of those same mistakes. So my husband and I had a lot of conversation about how we wanted to operate, how we wanted to not talk about what we have experienced, but learn from that and say now we know what not to do. And so we excuse me, tried to put all of that into practice in the ministry that we're in.
What inspired you to become part of this 20 Preachers' Wives anthology?
To be honest, Miss Queenie, I turned it down when I was first asked. The producer I met on the book slam on Tuesday nights, and he reached out based on a referral. And I turned it down. I said, I have so many things I have to do. It was just before traveling to Houston and North Carolina. I said, I don't know if I can do this. I'd rather not put my name in the hat. And my husband and I were sitting on our porch enjoying our afternoon as the sun prepares to go down. That's kind of where we wind down and kind of bring the day together. And I was telling him about the call I received from Indy Brennan, who's the producer in this whole effort, uh, offering me an opportunity to participate. And I told my husband, as I was saying the words, I felt God tell me, no, call him back. As the words were coming out of my mouth as to why I turned it down, I felt immediately I was to call him back. So I told my husband, hold on a minute. I need to go and call him right now. I called him back and said, I feel like I'm supposed to be a part of this, so please add my name in. And what I was concerned about was when we're creating, it takes time to create. You have to research sometimes the characters and topics that you're covering. And God just reminded me, you don't have to research this. It's in you already. This is your
Hmm.
experience.
Hmm.
So it was the easiest writing job I've had in a long time, just pouring it out to the point where I had so many more words than I needed. And as I narrowed it down to the word count that we were supposed to submit, my husband read it. He said, wow, he said, this can become a book all by itself, just telling about all the things we have gone through. And I said, yeah, you're right. It can be.
Do you think this anthology was needed? And if so, why?
I absolutely think it's needed because this has been kind of a quiet existence for many of the preacher's wives, just quietly accepting whatever they have to accept in an effort to make sure they're sitting and standing by their husband in his position, his role. What has evolved over time is many of us are more than just preacher's wives. Some of the women are actually pastors now. And some of the women writing for the book are not only pastors like me, I'm an ordained minister. So even my ordination didn't matter. And getting my PhD getting my doctorate in
Mhm.
theology didn't matter to some of these preachers and some of these ministries. They still put you down on the floor. And so all of that, I just feel like it's given a voice to women and in ministry, but it's also designed to help those that are just now getting their feet wet in the assignment so that the wisdom will help them maneuver and kind of maneuver through the process, navigate the challenges they may have to face depending on the ministry they're in. Because we made it clear, our, you know, the pastor and the board does not direct our marriage. They're directing the
Mhm.
assignment, but not us as a couple.
Can you tell us about your contribution in the anthology?
Yeah, I can give you a little tidbit. I gave you a little clip, a snippet. I began talking first about what I saw. And I believe that what I saw, three different incidences that I saw growing up, I was in a leadership role, but not a minister or anything. I think I was over the choir at the time. So sometimes when you're in those positions, you get to see what the audience doesn't get to see. In one case, I talked about minister's wife, the pastor's wife, who the whole congregation just didn't like her. And I just couldn't get with that. I didn't understand that. And why the board or the pastor himself did not speak to that and encourage people to really support his wife. It's not an easy road. This is the mother of his children. And they eventually got a divorce because that's how bad and how intrusive the boards were back then, how intrusive the congregation was back then. And it's unfortunate that it drove them apart and they divorced. I also talked about another situation I saw where I said, and I said to the group, I said, it's not always the congregation or the board. Sometimes it's the pastor's wife herself. I
Mm-hmm.
said, because in my early journey, becoming a preacher's wife and planting our first ministry, some of those folks out there were not warm and welcoming. I
Mm-hmm.
talk about
Mm-hmm.
one in particular who had just moved to the area. We met at a conference. I greeted her and said, "Oh, yeah, you just moved here, blah, blah, blah. It's a pleasure to meet you." And she quipped and says, "Oh, so you have to come to a conference to meet me?" And I thought, see, that's the stuff that we really don't need. And so I talk about some of the things I witnessed way before becoming a preacher's wife because it helped me to see what I didn't want to become a part of or be once I was in that role. And so that really helped me. It was a lot. So it's not always, um, and it's not always a preacher's wife sitting in innocence. Sometimes they're at fault too by not warming. And maybe it is. We've talked about it. Maybe it's regarding, guarding your heart and your husband, because another preacher's wife is not after another preacher's wife's husband, not at all. And so sometimes it came across as if they've had to become that because of all the stuff we've done. So
Mm-hmm.
I talk about
Mm-hmm.
how my husband and I made the decision to handle women issues because it happens.
Mm-hmm.
Women come after your pastor. And so we talked about that, how we're planning to handle it. So we put some protocols in place based on what we've already seen to make sure that never happened.
Okay. What can the church do to create a healthy environment for the preacher wife, the family, the marriage itself?
Well, I can tell you this, that becoming a preacher, that's an assignment, that's a calling. But the only thing that God mandated was necessary was when he mandated marriage. That it should be held in higher regard
Mm-hmm.
in terms of how we should treat it. And so no board and no congregation should come between your marriage and who you are as a couple. And so we have to be careful of that. And it should be promoted in the church like that. I'm hoping that what it will also do is bring conviction to those ministries that are still operating out of order, that are not welcoming to women, or congregations that are not welcoming to the idea of a preacher's
Mm-hmm.
wife, because it can be a lonely existence for some women. I'm thankful, like I said, that I didn't have that, but it's out there and I've seen it happen. I've even seen one case I talk about where the preacher's wife was angry with her husband's choice in the choir director. So just so happens the choir director was a family member of mine, so I knew about it. And just when I first witnessed it myself, rolling the eyes at the choir director, just giving her the cold shoulder, I'm going, what in the world is that?
Mm-hmm.
Because she
Mm-hmm.
was mad at her husband's decision, which you have to be careful about because it is his decision as the leader. But I'm grateful that in how my husband and I operated our ministry, we discussed things together. Then it goes before the board, and then it gets validated. But it's been some ugly things I've witnessed out there.
Wow. What has been the most challenging issue for you as a preacher wife in the church?
I think the one challenging area was what I mentioned earlier is just the the tactics of other women who would go after or come after your
Mm-hmm.
husband. And as our role as a wife and as his role as a husband, it's his job to cover me and my job to cover him. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't play. I don't play with that kind of mess, Miss Queenie. I don't. And so we had to decide how we chose to handle it. And I remember a specific incident, I think I talked about it in the book, where we noticed a woman coming in. And I'm thankful that The other associate minister was female too, and a great friend of ours. She was with us when we planted the church. She was a little older than my husband and I, but she was supportive from day one. So she and I were associate ministers together. And so we made the decision, my husband and I, that when we did altar call, that he would not minister to the women unless it was something that was specific. And then I made sure I was with him when
Mm-hmm.
that happened. So we always established a line where the other associate minister and I, Minister Dansby and I, we would have we would minister to the women and my husband would minister to the men. And this particular Sunday, we noticed this woman maneuvering in the line, trying to get over there where my husband was with the men. And so when Minister Dansby and I noticed it, we decided to make sure that didn't happen because we saw what she was doing. She really looked like a strange person. So I don't know what she was up to, but she was up to no good. So when that happened, when she saw that we kind of blocked her from going into that line and encouraged her to come into the line with all the other women, she returned back to her seat. She didn't even stay in the line. So that told us she was not up to any good at all. And so those are kind of the situations we have to face. It's not easy, but you
Mm-hmm.
do. I've
Mm-hmm.
had a situation when my husband was assistant pastor where the person who handled the money, whenever my husband got reimbursed, she handing him checks. And I'm going, talk to my husband because women can recognize the tactics of other women. Men sometimes it just escapes them. So I had a conversation. I said, look, she's not giggling around the pastor when she engages with him. She should not be giggling around you. She should show you respect as the assistant pastor. I said, that's not okay. And I said, would you like me to handle it or would you like to handle it? And so Pastor Bruce said, no, I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it. So the next time I had a conversation with that person, she came up to me and says, oh, Minister Velma, uh, Assistant Pastor Bruce wants me to give you the checks from now on. I said, not a problem. Thank you. So I said, I guess my husband handled it.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and so those are kind of the tips, tidbits I'm sharing with you that happens sometimes, but it's some things, and even ministering to a member of the ministry, my husband will not do it privately. I'm present because there's been ministers that have been accused of things as well. So
Mm-hmm.
to protect him and protect them, we try to set those protocols in place to guard him.
Do you have a particular area of ministry that you serve in the church?
Yeah, I'm over the women's ministry. I've done Bible studies for our teens, and I also am a member of the praise team. My oldest daughter is the leader of the praise team, so I sing on the praise team as well.
Again, who is your pastor and represent your church?
Woo-hoo-hoo! My pastor is Pastor Dr. Bruce Anthony Bagby, and we've been married 48 years together, and we've been in the ministry that he planted for 10 years. The last 3 years has been online because of the pandemic, and so we just asking God to show us what's next for us. But that's who he is, and he's my high school sweetheart.
Yes.
So that's the one thing I shared, Miss Queenie, is that we were blessed to be 38 years into our marriage when God called him to plant the church. So we were able to establish ourselves way before moving into that leadership role.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What has been one of the greatest blessings in your ministry thus far?
The greatest blessing when my husband and I can sit down and look to see the people who have been with us in the ministry from the very beginning and see their growth. And I feel like we can say, God, we have done what you have called us to do in the lives of those individuals because we can see them in terms of where they were when we first met them and where they are now. And that was all we thought our assignment was to do, is to make sure that the people got planted in the church, that they were growing in the direction they
Mm-hmm.
needed to go. And that didn't mean they had to stay with us. Sometimes our church appeared to be a depot where people came in to rest from all the stuff they've been through in other churches, where they can heal, get better, and figure out what it is God wants for them to do. And so we didn't mind helping them to figure that out and helping them to move through what they had gone through. And so sometimes we were just a depot for people to stop in and just be refreshed. They may have come for a few weeks or so, and then we didn't see them anymore because we believe that every individual belongs to God. Nobody that comes in belongs to us. There's some ministry who thinks everybody belongs to them, but no. We
Mhm.
feel like we're supposed to pour in what we're supposed to pour in, and hopefully they're ready to go and do what God has called them to do after that.
Amen. What are the qualities, or what do you think the qualities of a pastor wife should have?
I think the quality should be the same as the qualities you need in your marriage because if you haven't established that, that's something you need to work on because the assignment is just an assignment. I do know that it takes it takes an understanding of what a leader is. I've seen people in the position that were ill prepared and ill trained to be a leader because it's a servant leader that we are. The people are not there to serve you. You're there to serve them just as Jesus did in his ministry. So we're servant leaders, making sure we understand that is the direction we should be going and they're not there to serve us. For instance, we purposely changed our attire for the congregation God sent us because they weren't people, not everybody in the ministry had big incomes and things of that nature. So I purposely didn't look like I'm dressed today. I was happy to be able to just kind of relax in my dress code in a sense because
Hmm.
I didn't want anybody to feel like I was better than them or we were better than them. And so we tried to establish that as a practice. And so I just think that you have to understand what role God has called you to. Make sure your marriage and communication in your marriage happens first. Make sure you pull away from ministry work to sow into your marriage relationship and spend time with your husband and you, him with you. Making sure that you're communicating and have conversations at home, not down at the church. What we make a decision about at home, it carries to the church. Making sure you're using wisdom when you're engaging with people, that you understand that God calls you to love them. Nobody coming into the ministry is perfect because if that's the case, we wouldn't even be there. And just using wisdom in how you approach your role is really what I would say. But if you establish that relationship as a couple, even before you get down to the church, then you should be okay. But understand your role as a leader is not for people to serve you, but for you to serve them.
Hmm. Is there any scriptures in the Bible that relates to being a preacher's wife?
Well, I didn't, we were talking about that, and I didn't refer to any specific to that.
Mhm.
What I referred to was the scriptures related to us as a couple and the mandate. And I talk a lot about the mandate for marriage because, again, it's just an assignment, and assignments change. Our assignments as a pastor and wife could change. God could lead us to move into another arena. But what will not change is our mandate to be married to each other, to provide uh, that covering for each other wherever God plants us and whatever God decides to do. And I think that's the approach I took in my writing, is to remember that calling. The only thing that he requires for us is the mandate for marriage. He didn't mandate the assignment at all because it could be temporary. It won't be long term. And so you got to remember that you're not in it for the long haul necessarily, but you are in your marriage and you're going to be held accountable by what you do in that.
Now, the All the Preacher's Wives anthology, it released yesterday, and
Mhm.
tell us more about that. How can we get it? What formats it's in?
Well, it's going to be in both paperback and ebook. They're in the process of adding it to Amazon, so it should be there soon. Right now, the pre-orders are available on the allthepreacherswives.com, all is one word, allthepreacherswives.com. And so I plan to add it to my homepage as well, drvelma.com. I plan to add it to the books that I'm responsible for on my Amazon page. So you can also go to author Dr. Velma Bagby's Amazon page. And so we're in the process of doing that. This release actually is happening in Dallas today, this entire weekend. So all the other women are in Dallas right now celebrating. There's a few of us that couldn't attend. So all of that will come to fruition. I'm hoping by Monday when everybody returns, and we'll see more of the preachers' wives out there on the internet.
Okay. And what are you currently working on right now?
Right now, I'm working on my third book to the book series, the Catch series, and it is on pre-order as an ebook on Amazon, The Wrong Catch. So I'm finalizing that. I'm sending out free copies for those who signed up to receive a free chapter each time. Oh, I'm sorry, that's my Gracie is distracting me right now. So they're getting free chapters right now, but I'm finalizing that so that I can get that done and released in 2023. I am beginning to finish fleshing out my next book releasing in 2023, which is called The Women Who Tear Down the House. And that's based on Proverbs 14:1. There's the woman who builds and there's the woman who tears down. So I'm focusing on the women who tears down the house, and that's coming out in 2023 as well.
Okay. And how can we find you and your books?
I mentioned my website. I also mentioned my Amazon site. You can reach me there. But in addition to all of that, I am on Instagram as Dr. Velma Bagby _author. I'm on Twitter as Bagby Velma. And then I'm on LinkedIn as Dr. Velma Bagby. And then Goodreads, you can find me there. On my author page on Amazon, I'm on there as Dr. Velma Bagby. So, and I'm on YouTube as well. So you can feel free to connect with me through any of those means. On Facebook, I have both a Facebook page and a Facebook profile. On my Facebook profile, there's a LinkedIn, so it'll take you to any one of these sites if you like to do that. In addition to, I still have available the free chapter 6 of the very first book, The Catch No One Wants. It's available for free. You can download it by using my LinkedIn uh, uh, connection, which is on my profile page.
Well, is there anything else you would like to add before we close?
No, I just love your interviews. I thank you for your questions, and I thank you for taking time to interview me about this book today. It was really, your questions were really good.
All right. Can you show us the cover of All the Preacher Wives?
Pulling back the curtain, this is All the Preacher's Wives, an anthology. I'm really
Oh,
excited for these women.
well, thank you for coming in today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Miss Queenie.
All right. This is Queenie Clem with Queenie's Book Talk and Reviews. Happy reading. Bye, y'all.